Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Prizren, Kosovo, Center of Islamic Heritage in the Balkans. Against the beautiful backdrop of the lofty Shah Mountains and on the banks of the Lumburdi River in Kosovo lies the city of Prizren. From ancient times it was an important craft manufacturing and trading center in the intersection of an east-west trade route from the Adriatic to and from the Danube and northwest routes through the interior of the Balkans. In many ways it resembles Sheki on the slopes of the Caucasus Range in northern Azerbaijan and Gjirokastra in neighboring Albania. Prizren municipality shares borders with Albania and North Macedonia. It is 175 kilometers northeast of Tirana, Albania's capital, and 90 kilometers northwest of Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia. In the Middle Ages, Prizren became the capital of the Serbian Empire. In 1455, it was conquered by Ottoman Fatih Sultan Mehmed II. It is reported that Isa Bey, the army commander responsible for establishing Ottoman rule in the city, quickly built a little open-air namazgah, which still exists, for his troops so that they would have a place to pray. Sultan Mehmed II himself performed Juma namaz in the city's Orthodox cathedral, which henceforth continued to function as a mosque. Throughout its Ottoman history, Prizren was an important regional center of administration. In the late 19th century, it became the focal point of Albanian nationalism movements, and in 1912, part of the new Serbian state. For many decades, Kosovo has been in the international eye as a vortex of confessional and territorial conflict. But I remember Prizren as it was before the savagery. I was based there in the 1960s while undertaking ethnographic research in the Islamic Balkans. I remember an early market day in summer, smoke rising through the morning mists, river mists, the silhouettes of minarets and tall fortified houses, kulas, piercing the clear summer air above. I remember the roads and pathways into the city thronged with locals in their colourful traditional embroidered costumes, riding or leading animals with fresh produce to sell. Passing on their way wicker fence gardens dense with vivid dahlia blooms and trees laden with young apples. I remember basketry beehives and small vernacular mosques, a world unchanged for hundreds of years. The reportage of war and political turmoil has obscured awareness of Prizren's rich Islamic cultural heritage, which has survived remarkably unscathed, unlike in other centers in Kosovo. Thankfully, in a time of peace, relics of the past of all its historical cultures are now being appreciated, and efforts are being made to care for this heritage anew. Prizren is a remarkably preserved Ottoman Balkan city and remains permeated with Turkic Islamic culture. It is unique in the degree to which this heritage survives, living and vibrant. Albanian, Serbian, Bosnian, and Turkish are official languages. Although the majority of its 88,000 population are ethnic Albanians, most everyone can speak Turkish, and the Turkish community plays an influential role. By the 19th century, Prizren had grown to become the second most important Albanian ethnic center. However, the communist leadership in 1947 decided to move their capital to Pristina. While causing somewhat of a downturn in terms of the city's status, as regards its built heritage, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, helping to preserve it from the worst communist building excesses. Like Sheki in Azerbaijan, Gjirokastra in Albania, and Safranbolu in Turkey, the settlement of Prizren developed below a defensive castle, which strategically commanded the river valley below. Its urban structure is typical of Ottoman provincial cities, with a public core composed of a bazaar, areas dedicated to traditional manufactures, and the community's principal religious buildings. The domestic quarters of its inhabitants lie beyond the public space. The central zone of the city of Prizren is called Sadirvan, Persian for spring with many flows. The city was famed for its extensive water supply infrastructure. Today there are 20 mosques in Prizren. The most prominent is the Mosque of Sinan Pasha, built in 1615 by Sufi Sinan Pasha, governor of Bosnia. Its large dome, high arcaded portico, and tall minarets dominate the skyline. Its interior is richly ornamented with 19th century painted mural decoration and Quranic inscriptions in characteristic Balkan Baroque style. Its complex once also included a madrasa and library. A number of mosques are earlier in date. The Suzy Celebi Mosque was built in the early 16th century by the Naqshbandi adherent and poet Mahmud Abdullah, whose benevolent public works also included a library, Sufi Tariqat Lodge, Tekke, madrasa, and a stone bridge over the Limburdi River. The Sarashana Mosque, built in 1534, is also closely linked with the Tekke, that of the Halvati Tariqat. The Mosque of Mudiris Ali Effendi, 1543 to 1581, is also noteworthy. However, the city's biggest religious complex was that of the Mahmud Bashar Mosque, built in the second half of the 16th century. It served as the community's Juma Friday mosque. The Arasta Mosque, built in 1594, was demolished in 1963. Only its minaret remains. Prizren stands out today, as it did in its Islamic past, for the intense activity of its many Sufi tariqats, a feature of the Balkans as a whole. Throughout the Ottoman Balkans, the tariqats were a vibrant and fundamental element of the life of all its Muslim inhabitants. A number of historic tekke have survived and are still in active use. They include the 17th century tekke of Sheikh Akizeh of the Saadi Tariqat, the Halveti tekke, 1604, the Kadiri Zinglirle tekke, 1646, and the Rufai tekke. The most obvious features of Prizren's civil architecture are its beautiful monumental stone bridges over the Limburdi River, which link the two sides of the city. The landmark double-arched stone bridge built by Ali Bey in the 16th century has become an icon of Prizren. Washed away by floods in 1979, it was reconstructed in 1982. Other historical bridges are the Suzy Celebi bridge built in 1513 and the Arasta bridge built in the 18th century. Another building serving the fundamental needs of the community is the Noble Hammam, constructed by Ghazi Mehmet Pasha, 1563 to 1574. Complementing these religious and public buildings in Prizren's Ottoman Balkan cityscape are the many surviving traditional houses lining its cobblestone streets. They are mostly two-storied, of infill timber frame construction with a many-windowed upper floors, often projecting over the street, often with large walled gardens full of fruit trees and vegetable plots in summer. At the time of the Islamization of the Balkans, Prizren was known as Prizren, full of jewelry, and was already a center of fine craft manufactures. By 1571, Muslim craftsmen were already dominant in the city. In the second half of the 19th century, 124 different handicrafts were recorded as being made in the city, in over 1,384 specialist workshops. Tanneries were built along the flowing waters below the town, their products being used locally to produce a range of fine leather goods. Prizren boasted the makers of weaponry gunsmiths. The products of its gunsmiths were exported as far away as Egypt. Jewelers and masters of silver and gold filigree. Other craftsmen producing items of more general utility included metal workers, saddle makers, farriers, etc. While economic and social forces led to the decline of most of these traditional industries, some fine craftsmen still work in the Sadirvan, catering to certain local needs, such as items used as accessories in local folk costumes, and selling to visiting tourists. Notwithstanding the blessing that Prizren's built heritage was spared during the late 20th century conflicts, a sluggish economy and lack of maintenance has put many historic buildings at risk. Awareness of these matters are promoted in exhibitions at the city's Archaeological Museum and Ethnographic Museum and concerned local citizens, backed up by national and international entities. They're doing much to address the challenges. Local action is formalised through a number of organisations, including the Institute for Protection of Cultural Monuments and the Cultural Heritage Foundation. The Prizren municipality has formulated a cultural tourism strategy, which includes an emphasis on Muslim-friendly tourism. The Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TICA, has shown particular solidarity in restoring the Namazgah of 1455 and the early 17th century mosque of Sinan Pasha. The World Monuments Fund is also engaged. The Swedish NGO, Cultural Heritage Without Borders, is collaborating with the municipality through the development of the Preservation and Development Plan for the historic zone of Prizren. Although Prizren's population was predominantly Muslim and Albanian, like all Ottoman Balkan cities, it has substantial communities of other confessions, which had been largely harmoniously integrated for centuries: Christians, Jews, and Roma. The very built landscape of Ottoman-era Prizren bears witness to this fact. At the heart of the Sadivan is an Ottoman mosque, an Orthodox church, and a Roman Catholic church, all lying in close proximity and stature. Notwithstanding the appalling events of the 20th century, the community has a much longer-lasting history of religious and ethnic tolerance. Indeed, today, the city of Prizren is now widely perceived as a symbol of interconfessional and interethnic coexistence.